Welcome, everybody. We're just starting to bring in our audience for our presentation today with Chantal Bilodeau. My name is Hope McIntyre. I'm Artistic Director currently of SARASVATI Productions. And yeah, we're excited to do this. So we've kind of got three ways that people are viewing us right now. So if you're in the Zoom room, that's great. We like to have a live audience and make it feel like a real presentation, and gives you the ability to interact with Chantal if you have questions. While she's doing the presentation, you can feel free to turn off your video and just watch her presentation, and then we'll bring people back in for Q&A. We also have folks watching on the live stream, so they are watching as just viewers. But I'm gonna get us started with a few introductions. And first of all, as I said, I'm the outgoing Artistic Director of SARASVATI Productions. I'm very excited to be seeing our 18th annual FemFest through, and ultimately passing things off to our incoming Artistic Director, Frances Conkin, who's been around at the festival and meeting many people. And just to acknowledge that we are all kind of participating from different lands, and we appreciate if everyone takes a moment to kind of acknowledge that land that they are on. We are here on Treaty 1 territory, and that is the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Innu, the Oji-Cree, the Dene, Dakota, and the homeland of Métis Nation. And SARASVATI Production is very much dedicated to reconciliation, and we've been making many changes, and we continue to do so as part of our commitment to action. And now for the order of today, one of the things that we are looking forward to, which connects to our responsibility as caretakers of the land, is how theater and climate change intersect, and our role as a theater company in that reality. And so it is our honor to have with us Chantal Bilodeau as our kind of guest artist throughout FemFest. And she has an incredible history. And when we looked for someone who has been working in theater and climate change, she was the first name that kind of came to the surface. So Chantal is a Montreal-born, New York-based playwright and translator. She has done so much work that focuses on the intersection of science, policy, art, and climate change. Her plays and translations have been presented in dozens of countries around the world, and she is the recipient of the Woodward International Playwriting Prize, as well as the first prize in the Earth Matters Onstage Echo Drama Festival and the Uprising National Playwriting Competition. She serves as the Artistic Director of the Arctic Cycle and is currently at work on a series of 8 plays that look at the social and environmental changes taking place in the 8 Arctic states. So we're super excited to have her tell us a little bit about her playwriting journey through climate change and climate action. And after she speaks, we will be going into an opportunity for questions. So please note those, use them in the chat function on YouTube, or let us know if you have questions at the end. I'm going to pass it right over to Chantal.
Thank you, Hope. Thank you for this nice introduction. I'm very happy to be part of this festival. Hello, everybody who is on the call, on the Zoom call, and also everybody who's watching us on the live stream. I will be sharing my screen to tell you a little bit more about what I'm doing by doing a little show and tell. So let me do that right now. And okay, here we go. So as Hope said, I am the Artistic Director of the Arctic Cycle, which is an organization that uses theater to foster dialogue about the global climate crisis, create an empowering vision of the future, and encourage people to take action. And here we go. So we have 4 different programs. The first one, so the Arctic Cycle was created originally to, when I started being interested in merging my interests about the climate, my concerns about the climate, I should say, and theater. I first of course, because I'm trained as a playwright, I first approached that as a playwright. So I created this project of writing 8 plays about the 8 countries of the Arctic. As you can see here, you have a map of the Arctic seen from the North Pole with the 8 countries. And I will tell you a little bit more about that. Another project is the Artists and Climate Change website, which is a platform where artists from all disciplines can write and learn about other artists who are engaging with the climate. So we publish articles, interviews, essays. We also have a podcast that somebody else is doing that we repost on the website. And it was initially, I initially dreamed up this project because this was about almost 10 years ago, and I was looking to connect with other artists, and I couldn't find, at the time, I couldn't find anybody who was doing that kind of work. So I kept thinking there must be people out there, you know, let me see how can we find each other? And so by creating this platform, it was a way where we could find each other and other people could find us. I also, Climate Change Theater Action is another project, which I will tell you more about. It's a 2-year, it's every other year. It's a big festival where we commission playwrights from around the world, and we present these plays also from around the world, but I'll save that for a little bit later. And the fourth initiative is this project, which usually happens every year, but we couldn't do this year because of the COVID restrictions. It's the incubator, the Artists and Climate Change Incubator, and it's a 5-day intensive think tank workshop where we gather around 20 people, artists, activists, scientists, educators, to talk and explore more deeply the intersection of theater and climate. And hopefully this will return when we can meet again, when we can gather again in the same room. So why theater and climate? Like I said, I came at this as a playwright. And when I started paying more attention, I noticed, as you can see here, these are headlines from 2018. I could see that the focus was very much on disaster. So of course, you know, it's important. We need to hear about it. We need to be aware of how urgent the situation is. There's really dire things going on at the moment as we speak. We need to be aware, but the emphasis in mainstream media and also in the creative world is very much on the negative, on all the things that are going wrong. Even when you think about movies, you know, blockbuster movies, science fiction, literature, it tends to be, you know, dystopian scenarios. In addition to that, this is an example of, these are magazine covers from last year, actually 2018. For Earth Day, the Washington Post magazine published 24 magazine covers about climate change. So these are just a selection of them, which, as they say, illustrated an aspect of climate change that the Post wrote about in the past year or so. So again, as you can see, very disturbing scenarios, disturbing imagery, certainly highlights the urgency and the direness of the situation, but can also feel disempowering because it feels like the dice have been cast essentially, and this is where we're heading and there's nothing we can do, which of course is not true. Now, why merge theater and climate? One of the reasons is so more people talk about it. So in this graph, you can see this is a graph from you can see at the bottom, the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication and the Center for Climate Change Communication at George Mason University. Those are 2 big institutes that do a lot of research on climate change and communication. And they came up, this is for the US, I believe. So they came up with this graph where the black line shows that 63% of America, yeah, this is from the US, of Americans rarely or never discuss global warming. And the green line represent the ones who do, who say they occasionally do. And this is just informal conversations with family and friends. And while the numbers may be slightly different this year, and they may be slightly different for different countries, I believe that the gist of it is the same, which is these are not things we tend to talk about. So to address these two things, the fact that climate change is not something we talk about in regular conversations, and the fact that when we do hear about it, it's always very negative, then I went on this journey to start writing about it as a playwright. And originally I thought I was going to write one play. I started doing research and thought I was going to write one play, and then it grew up and became something much bigger. So here you have a map of the North. You can see the North Pole right in the middle of a map, right here, and all the countries that are around the pole. And what first drew me to this work was a trip to Alaska in 2007, where I went just on a visit because I had a friend who lived there who said, you should come and visit, I'll show you around. He's a pilot, so he had a small plane and could fly me over Denali National Park. It was beautiful. And of course, 2007 was 1 year after Al Gore's first documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. And it was also just when people were starting to talk about climate change more. It was more present in the mainstream media. So the combination of those two things and my visit to this place where people were, of course, already being very affected made me think, oh, I think I can probably bring these concerns into my work. And being from Canada, and us Canadians having such a huge Arctic countries, I started looking at what was going on in the Canadian Arctic. And I was lucky enough to be able to go and visit. So I visited Baffin Island, which is, whoops, sorry about that, which is right here, this island right here. And did some research. Read a lot of science. This was the very beginning, so I didn't know all that much about climate change at the time, so tried to inform myself, and then went on this trip to Baffin Island, and this became the first play of this cycle, which is called Sila. And here I'm going to show you just a few images from that research trip. As you may know, Baffin Island, fairly isolated place. The main port of entry is Iqaluit, so that's where I flew. This is a photo of Iqaluit coming on a plane. And then I went to two different smaller communities from Iqaluit, one to the west called Kimirut and one to the east called Panyurtung. And while I was there, I also made a point of talking to several different people. I talked to the Coast Guards. I talked to people from the Nunavut Research Institute. I talked to a climate activist. And this was after I had done some research and talked to scientists before I went. And my biggest lesson in going was that the idea I left with changed. So I thought I was going to write about something. And then once I got there, I realized that my idea was too simplistic and that it was actually the complexity of the issue and the various people involved that was most interesting and most, I think, important to communicate. And by that, I mean that, I could have written, like originally I had this idea that I could write a play about the construction of a deep sea port in the very northern part of Baffin Island. And this was all fiction. That would impact the Inuit community there, but serve maritime traffic as the Northwest Passage was opening to shipping containers going through in the summer. And of course, it's easy to write a story of good versus evil, but then I realized, well, it's not that clear cut. It's not good versus evil. It's much more complicated than that because, you're coming to a place where there's very little industry, very little infrastructure, you know, a very small economy. And so there are compromises that need to be made to help people have the bare necessities, the things that we take for granted where we live. And so then I'll show you a few more images. This is Iqaluit again. What the structure, the white structure you see in the middle is the high school, I believe. It's been a little while, so I don't remember as clearly as I used to. I took a hike in one of the national parks. So this was one of the vistas, like really stunningly beautiful place. And this was, again, walking around. This was not as isolated. It was, I think it was just outside of Iqaluit, and some of the signs of humans we would encounter along the way, these rocks, you know, these inuksuks that were left to indicate different things. And that became Sila. So Sila, this is a photo from the premiere that took place at Underground Railway Theatre in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2014. And two of the characters in the play are polar bears, so a mama polar bear and baby polar bear. And these are the puppets that were created for the production. They were stunning puppets. The baby, as you can see, was manipulated by one person. And the mama had one person at the head, who you can see in that photo. There was also someone inside the bear that was carrying the body of the bear on her back, and she was manipulating the front leg. And there was somebody at the back who was manipulating the back legs. And the play looks at how climate change is impacting the natural, so animals, natural population. Some of the characters there was a climate scientist, a climate activist, Inuit climate activist, or Inuit climate activist, I should say, and her daughter. There was 2 Coast Guards, an elder, and I think that's everybody. And then it's how the play starts with fairly separate stories that come together, where people have to learn how to work together for things to happen in the best possible way for everyone. I have a few more photos. This is another photo from the same production. This man who you see on the picture is playing a climate scientist. He was the character of the climate scientist. And in this scene, he is underwater. He has just fallen through the ice. And behind him in shadow puppetry is the goddess of the ocean and the underworld, who has an interaction with him while he's underwater. And then this is a different production, more recent, that was done at a university, which I didn't get to see, but as you can see, they interpreted the world differently than the other one. But it's the same, I believe if it's not the same scene, it's around the same place in the play, because I think what you can see is the goddess with the really long arm is the goddess of the ocean and the underworld, and some of the animals on posts behind her, who in the story, these sea animals are trapped in her hair and they get released at a point in the story. So this play, Sila, in the process of writing the play, I realized that there was so much more I wanted to say and so much more I wanted to learn that I could put in one play. And I tried to figure out what to do. I went through a few different ideas, and eventually I was like, okay, first I tried to get other people to do things because it's always easier. But then I was realizing that it actually wasn't going to be easier, and that, if I was so passionate about this, I should do it. So I decided, okay, I needed some kind of container, and there are the 8 countries that are part of the Arctic Circle, that touches the Arctic Circle and that are part of the Arctic Council. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to write one play set in each of these countries. And so that will give me a chance to see what the similarities and the differences are. And because it's going to take a while to write all these plays, it will also, as a body of work, it will track our relationship to this issue over many years, hopefully. So second play, I had a chance to do a residency in Svalbard, which you can see on this map. And Svalbard is a group of islands that belong to Norway, but are not attached to the mainland of Norway. They're actually halfway between Norway and the North Pole. And this was a residency on a boat. There were 20 of us. Artists, a few, I think one or two scientists, some educators, mostly artists. And we went on this boat and we sailed around these islands for 10 days, which gave me I saw stunning vistas again of the Arctic, the Norwegian Arctic. Almost nobody lives there, so we had very few encounters with people, but Sila was taking place all on land. And since I had this residency in Norway, I decided, why don't I explore the sort of the maritime side of the Arctic? So in addition to this trip, I also went on subsequent trips. I went to the mainland of Norway to try to get to know the culture and talk to people better, since Svalbard was not, we didn't have that many interactions with people. So I went to a few different towns in Norway, a few different cities. I went to Oslo, Bergen, and Tromsø, which is in the very north and sits north of the Arctic Circle. And then I had a chance to develop the play with Norwegian actors and a dramaturg and a singer-songwriter who wrote music for the play. So this play became, first I'll show you pictures of the trip. So this was the boat we were on. It's called the Antigua. And behind the boat is, you can see very clearly, there's a glacier. We were there in, it was end of September, beginning of October. And this is how every day we would go on land, and this is how we would get from the sailboat to land. So we would come down, we would go into these dinghies and do a few trips, stay on land for a few hours, and then go back on the boat. And here's a closer image of a glacier, which I was really fascinated by, because it was my first time so close, and I couldn't believe how colorful it was, how intricate, all these, it's very interesting to look at. This one looks like marble. So very, very vivid impressions of definitely the land is always a character. It's not something you just like walk through the way we go from our home to work and just get used to the scenery. This is something very specific. And this was a little fox who, before we left on the boat, we stayed one night in this town, Longyearbyen, the main town, the main port of entry. And this Arctic fox would come every morning because he was used to getting scraps from the kitchen. Very cute. This became Forward. Forward's the second play set in Norway. And of course, Canada is where I was born, is where I grew up, where I lived for a long time. I knew a lot more about it than I know about Norway. So I had to find sort of a point of entry to be able to tell that story. And my point of entry was a historical character named Fridtjof Nansen, who was a polar explorer, and he held the record of getting closest to the North Pole in the late 1800s, before somebody actually made it. And the thing that was so different about Nansen is all of the explorers before him had, their philosophy was to conquer nature, so go against the elements. And Nansen had a different idea. His idea was to go with nature. So his theory, there was a theory floating at that time where they suspected that there was a current in the North Pole, in the Arctic Ocean, that was clockwise, I believe. And so if he just went and got his ship locked in the ice, and the ship could resist the pressure of the ice, he could just wait for the current to take him to the North Pole. And while the theory is right, the time it would have taken, he had resources for 5 years. He was prepared to stay there for 5 years with his crew, but it would have taken longer than that. And once they realized that, they abandoned the ship, tried to make it on the ice, on skis, and with dogs, and didn't quite make it, but got the closest at the time. And so the story tells, the play tells that story, in addition to, well, the play tells two stories. It tells the story of Nansen going forward from 1893 to 1895, which was during his trip. And at the same time, it tells a story going backwards, starting from the present and going back in time to reach when Nansen came back from his trip. And it looks at the changes in Norwegian culture from how Nansen going to the pole created a ripple effect of changes in the Norwegian culture and other things too, like the discovery of oil, and how that led to climate change. But again, I was looking at the complexity of these stories coming together and trying to understand what, like, one thing I was really interested in understanding in with that play was we think so much about the future nowadays. You know, what are we leaving for the future? What are we leaving for the next generations? And I was wondering, what did people think before us? Like, did they think about what they were leaving for us? You know, was that even a concept at that time? And if so, how did they make decisions? And you know, I came to the conclusion that a lot of the time people make the best decisions they can in the moment with the information they have, not being able to anticipate some of the consequences later. And I'm not saying this to excuse in any way some of the decisions that are being made by politicians and corporations nowadays, but on an individual level, I think a lot of at the time that's true. And then it allows, if we think about it that way, it also allows us to be a little bit more compassionate with ourselves and with others in when we assess, you know, our role in the climate crisis and what we can and cannot do, or what we have been able to do or not do. So here's another shot from the same production. This was at Kansas State University in 2016. Same thing. And this, okay, so this was play number 2. Then again, so I never know which play I'm going to work on next. It depends on the opportunities. You know, how can I get myself to that place? Who do I know? Who can I talk to? What are the stories happening there? So the third play, again, I had a chance. I had already been to Alaska, but I had a chance to do another residency, which this time took me to Southeast Alaska, to the Inside Passage and a lot of the communities around there. And so this is the play that I am working on now. It was supposed to premiere in Alaska in this, like, just about right now. And of course that has been delayed. And so we have been doing some development online. And for now, the premiere is scheduled for the spring, if all goes well, if people can gather, and if not, it'll be hopefully a little bit later. So again, Alaska, a bit easier to write about than Norway, because I live in the US now. I know the culture, I know what's going on. I have a lot more to draw on to be able to write the play. So the first two plays have very big cast and can be quite intensive, you know, resource intensive to produce. And for Alaska, I gave myself a different challenge. I wrote a play for one character, and it's a one woman, one actress who will perform it. And it was a way to challenge myself artistically, but also in the plays, I often look at interconnectedness and complexity, like I mentioned. Interconnectedness, for Sila, the first play, I think of interconnectedness as a horizontal thing. It was interconnectedness across the land. You know, we were in one time frame, but across the land. For Forward, it was interconnectedness vertically. How do we connect? How we connected to the generations that came before us and the ones that are coming after. So it was through time. The play takes place over 120 years. And for Alaska, it was like, what does interconnectedness looks like in one body? So in one, how can you represent a community with just one body on stage? And these are some images. Alaska, if you have never been, is like picture perfect. Every time you turn around, there's like a postcard staring at you. So it's an amazing, amazing place. This was a hiking trip I took near Denali, in Denali National Park, in Mount Kinley in Denali National Park. A glacier from a plane again. And this was striking because one thing I didn't understand at the time was that, of course, the glaciers recede, you know, they go back, but they also deflate. So you can see the line along the mountain. This is how much thicker the glacier was. And so they go back in distance, but they also deflate in that way. And that was a very shocking thing to learn and to be able to see. Here's a community in Southeast Alaska. This is in Sitka, which is another place I visited when I went on the artist residency. And this is part of the beautiful totem poles that are created. This one is, again, just near Sitka. And I believe it's from the Tlingit tribe. So this became the play that I'm working on now. And this image, so again, you know, I never know where this artistic process is going to take me. As I was just at the very beginning of developing this play, I got an invitation to go to Helsinki because someone I know was presenting a side event as part of the U Arctic Congress, which is a huge conference that happens every year that brings people together from Arctic countries. And this woman was organizing a side event that was just women, a series of panels with just women, because she felt like in all these Arctic conferences where she was going, the people on panels were mostly men. And so she wanted to give voices to women. And it was a beautiful, beautiful day that she organized because she had women from all of these 8 Arctic countries talking about different things, from business to culture to violence against women, to education. But as part of it, as this side event, she wanted to have a cultural offering, and she asked me, because she knew I was working on this series of plays about the Arctic. She asked me to come and present something. And but you know, it was a short presentation. It was part of a reception one night where people were drinking and eating, and there were other speakers. So we had about 15 minutes. So what I did was I took this idea for the Alaska play, and I made essentially sort of a trailer of it. I wrote a 15-minute version. And this is the wonderful actress we brought with us, Julie Jesnek, and she performed it there. So I had a 15-minute version, and you know, afterwards I came back and I took this and I've been expanding it to a full-length version, which yeah, I'm very excited to be developing now. So these are the plays. So I'm coming back to the map of the Arctic scene from the top. So these are the plays. I have 5 more to go. I don't know how long it's going to take, but clearly I have to speed up if I want to get to the end before I'm too old. But in the process of writing these plays, again, you know, this came first. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there was a number of, we're doing a number of other programs now as part of the Arctic Cycle. And these programs came along because as I was working on the plays, I kept bumping into things I wanted that I would go look for and realize they were not there. And the platform, the Artists in Climate Change platform was one thing. The incubator, you know, was another thing I was looking for. It's like, oh, how can we gather and talk about these things and, you know, move the field forward? But another huge issue I saw, which is a little better now, but a little better, not a lot better, a little better, was that there were so few playwrights writing about these things. And, you know, even if I write 8 plays, it's not like I can churn them out, you know, every month, or like it just takes me a long time. It's also not right for me to be the only voice. There should be a lot more voices, a lot more, you know, diversity. People from all kinds of places and backgrounds should be writing about these things. And so I was trying to figure out what can be done. How can that be addressed with, you know, without just waiting for people to get interested in it? Is there any way we can speed up the process? And in talking with some friends one day, we had the idea of creating this initiative called Climate Change Theater Action. So Climate Change Theater Action happens every other year. The last one was in 2019. The next one will be in 2021. We commissioned 50 playwrights from around the world so every continent is represented, to write a short play about 5 minutes about an aspect of climate change based on a prompt. And then we take this collection of 50 plays and we say to people, here are plays, they're available, they're free, and we're asking you to please organize an event within a time window, which is usually in the fall, between September and December. Organize an event in your community. You can use one or as many plays as you want from the collection. You can add work from local playwrights. You can add music, visual arts, anything you feel, you know, you want. This event can be as big or as small as you want. It can be, you know, a fully produced show in a theater. It can be a reading in somebody's backyard. It's all dependent on your resources, and make it as unique as you can to serve your own community. And this was to, you know, we thought, okay, so we're going to put 50 more plays into the world. They're short plays, but still 50 more plays into the world. We're going to encourage 50 playwrights to think about these things, and who knows, then maybe they'll go on and be concerned about this issue and, you know, keep addressing it in their work. I also want to say that the model of a theater action already existed, slightly different. And this was a colleague of mine, SARASVATI, who founded No Passport, the organization No Passport, who had come up with the idea. And she had done theater actions on a variety of different topics, like the BP oil spill, the Orlando shooting. CARE is American, so these were American issues. And they were always one-off. So she, you know, would do something once. There would be a series of plays. They tended to be longer, about 15 minutes. They would be presented in a number of places, and then it was over. So we took that model, tweaked it a little bit, and then came out with Climate Change Theater Action. And I just want to point out that the photo also that you're seeing and on this slide is an action that was presented in 2017 in now I'm blanking, in the Czech Republic. So it was presented in a cafe, so you can get a sense of what it looks like. So the theme for 2021 hasn't been announced yet, but in 2019, our theme was lighting the way. And I'm going back here to the first few slides I showed you about the headlines in the papers that were all very negative, and these magazine covers that also depicted very dystopian futures. So we give a prompt to our playwrights to try to help them think beyond the apocalypse, essentially. And, you know, they're free to interpret the theme however they want, but we just want to provide a direction to sort of help them think towards the more empowering scenario, I should say. So lighting the way was we wanted them to look at climate, we said climate warriors and climate heroes. So who in the world, who in your community is doing amazing things? You know, who is like forging ahead and making things happen and essentially lighting the way towards a positive future. And we got extraordinary plays. As always, this was our 2017 was our second collection. Yes, no, 2019, I'm sorry, was our third collection. And yes, so I'm going to show you a little bit and tell you a little bit what happened with that. So we say to people, you know, here are the plays, you sign up, and then we stay in touch. We ask them, you know, we try to provide a little bit of material for marketing, a little bit of support. We put everything on our website. We put it on social media. And so we collect information as we go, and we make sure that we track everything and make everything as visible as possible to help people have their event known. And a lot of what happens is, you know, some of the events might be small. For example, people will do something, you know, with an audience of 20, sometimes even smaller, sometimes it's 200. But what may feel, you know, if you were doing it by yourself, it might feel like this is just a drop in the bucket. It doesn't have any impact. When you have hundreds of people doing the same thing, you know, in the same window of time around the world, then it feels like you're part of a movement, and it feels like together you're creating an impact. So this is just an example to show you where plays have been presented in the past. Theaters, of course, all kinds of different schools, outside in different public settings, libraries, churches, museums. Some of my favorites was, there was one event that was done at the foot of a glacier in Alaska, another one last year that was done, and the one in Alaska was in 2015. Last year, there was another one where people went in Florida, in the Keys in Florida, in kayaks and read the plays while they were in the kayaks. Some of the plays have also been adapted into short films. They've been presented on radio and as podcasts. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention, so climate change to theater action. So we ask people, you know, you organize an event, you present plays, other artistic offerings. As part of that, we say, please try to include an action. And by action, we mean anything that either brings people together or helps people take a step forward in their relationship with the climate. And again, we leave it open, you know, it should be specific to whoever is organizing the event and specific to that community. So these are some of the examples of the actions that have been taken in the past. Donations, there were a lot of donations to hurricane relief efforts in 2017 because there was a lot of damage done by hurricanes. Letters sent to government representatives, marches and pledges. In universities, there's often presentations by scientists because the universities will try to work with other departments they've never worked with before, or with their sustainability office, which more and more universities have. List of resources. One of my favorite ones from last year was there was a small town in Ontario that they raised money for tree planting efforts. These are the ones I can remember, but it's really the range of things of actions that are being taken are pretty wide. And then to give you a sense of our reach, so it has increased every time we've done it. We started small in 2015, where we were a lot less organized. We had no money. There were a few of us. We started late. You know, it was the first time, it was just an idea, and we thought, let's just like slap it together. And of course, every time we do it, we're a little bit more organized. We start earlier. But so in 2019, we had over 225 events in 25 countries. All 50 US states were represented, which was a big deal. Since I'm based in New York, it was a big deal for us because we've been trying all those years to have an event in every single state and in every province in Canada. And we haven't reached every province in Canada yet, but in 2019, we managed to get all 50 US states. Here's a list of some of the countries that participated, and we reached 25,000 people, which is astonishing because if you compare the resources that it takes, of course, every action is resourced locally. So we don't have money to give people to put on these events. They're supported by their own organizations, or they have their own budgets. But from our point of view, the organization is about what it would cost to put up a small production in a 99-seat theater or less that would run for 6 weeks and reach maybe 2,000 people. So the contrast is huge. We were able to reach that many more people with a fairly small budget. And I want to show you a few images from again, Climate Change Theater Action 2019, last year. So as part of the whole season, we do the launch. So we do a kickoff event in New York City to launch the whole 3 months of events. And this was part of our kickoff event last year. And to model, so we had, I think we presented 4 or 5 plays. We also had spoken word poetry. We commissioned a song, and we had a panel of women experts. We had someone who from the Climate Museum, someone who was an expert in policy. It was moderated by a journalist, and we had another person who was a climate scientist. So it was we were trying to have a pretty global view, not global, but holistic view on the climate. Completely different aesthetic. As you can see, this was in South Korea, in Seoul, South Korea, and it was in a school with young kids who read the plays and then did a series of activities around those plays. Another completely different event that was I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes here, that was put together by Be Wilderness Theater Company in Colorado, and it was all outside. It was in a national park, and we found out that they subsequently got kicked out by one of the park rangers who was not informed that they actually had permission to be there, but they managed to do their event. This was Native Earth, an Indigenous theater company in Toronto. And I believe that this play was actually by Yolanda Bonnell, who's presenting a show as part of this festival. Here is another presentation by an art center in Minnesota. Presentation by a group of students at Yale University as part of their monthly cabaret. This was Iowa State University. And this event was at Massey University in New Zealand. And I'm going to show you, so we people do their events, then we stay in touch with them and we ask them for a little bit of feedback afterwards. And we ask for, that's how I'm able to tell you some of the statistics I shared with you. So we know, where they did the event and sort of the details of the event. But afterwards, we also ask how many people organized the events, how many people participated. And we ask that they send us photos and footage when they have it. And so at the end of 2017, we created this trailer, this little video that gives you a sense of the kinds of events that are organized around the world, which I'm going to show you now. It's about a minute long. So the thing I would like to stress before I wrap this up is for a long time, there was this misconception about theater that addresses climate change, that it had to be bad theater. It was like people would think, oh, this is going to be an issue play. It's going to be didactic. I don't want anybody telling me what to do or how to think. And you're right. Nobody should be telling anybody what to do or how to think. But a bad play, a play about climate change that does that is a bad play, and it would be a bad play no matter what topic it addressed. So I hope what you got from the few images that were presented in the trailer was that plays that deal with issues of climate change can be playful, they can be funny, they can be poignant, they're about people, they're about struggles, hopes, all the good things that we normally put in place. They're about making meaning of something that is important, something that is touching everyone, that is affecting everyone to different degrees, but there will be no escaping it. And the sooner we learn to engage with this topic and really take it in, the better equipped we'll be in addressing it. I was talking to people yesterday, and I said, there is an inevitable amount of change that is locked in. So what we're experiencing today in terms of the changing climate is, I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I think it's about the emissions that were, put into the atmosphere 25 to 50 years ago, which means that there's a delay in the system. What we do, we're going to feel the effect 50 years from now. So even if today we stopped emitting altogether, there's still built-in disruption that's going to happen. And I'm not saying that to scare anyone, but just to recognize, we need to recognize that. And if we can recognize it, then we're better equipped to address it. And if theater can help provide an avenue to help people open their heart, feel the grief that we're all feeling, because, this is difficult, we're losing a lot, we're going to lose a lot. Being able to talk about it, not necessarily in political terms, although it's hard to avoid, and not necessarily in ideological terms, but in personal terms. Like, what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my family, for my friends, for my community? Then I think I think, yeah, that's the best thing that theater can do. And I'm certainly determined to do my part in that way. And oops, I'm sorry. Yeah, so in leaving, if you want to know more, you can look at thearcticcycle.org. That's our website. There's also a specific website for climate change theater action. All the events that took place in 2017 and 2019 are on the website, so you can get a sense of what people have done. And yeah, I think I will stop here, and I will stop sharing my screen now. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chantal. Yeah, and that was such a great encapsulation of years and years and years of work. And so privileged to hear about it. And I love what you were saying about the didacticism, because I know that comes up a lot, you know, as artists who want to make a difference, how we find the balance of that. So that was very useful. So yeah, we're going to open it up now to questions. And if folks are watching the live stream, they can feel free to use the YouTube chat, and we've got staff monitoring that. You can also send questions to us at info@sarasvati.ca, and we'll pass those along. Or if anyone's in the Zoom room with us, and we've got a few folks joining that way, you can feel free to use the chat in the Zoom room, or feel free to turn on your video and sound and ask a question of Chantal person to person, or as person to person as we get in the times we're living in right now. So I maybe will just kind of start with a few questions I've had just to get things rolling as people contemplate and send in anything. So I'm curious now what the repertoire looks like for these plays. So you've done the climate change theater action for over 3 series, is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so that means we have 150 plays. And I said in 2015 we were not that organized, but we got more organized after that. So in after the events in 2017, we published an anthology with those plays. And right now we're just in the process of finishing the anthology that will contain all the 2017 plays. So we just want to make them available so they can keep circulating.
And that was my other question, whether like all these pieces are now accessible, even if someone isn't able to organize an event during the time frame, are they there and available for people to utilize?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay because we never just post the plays online for anybody to take. So we, people get in touch with us, we share them with the participants during the time window. And then when that's done, there's just a delay between that and publishing the anthology. But the previous plays are always available, and sometimes if people hear about it and they contact us, we'll say yes, we'll give you access to the plays. You can organize an event even though it's outside of the time window.
Amazing. And I was really struck kind of by your mention of interconnectedness. And I think specifically on that interconnectedness between scientists and people doing the research work and us as artists, and how have you navigated kind of entering into those other worlds to build those bridges?
Maybe I have been lucky. For the most part, I found the scientists extremely welcoming, extremely interested. A lot of the time flattered that someone from outside of the science would be interested in their work. I think for them, it's often intriguing to see what other kind of audiences they can reach, an audience that they don't necessarily have access to. So it has been, I have found it incredibly fulfilling, and, making also connections with people I probably wouldn't encounter otherwise. And then discovering the overlaps and the things that we have in common, like the way scientists will approach their research. They ask a question and then they test it, which is a lot of what we do in the arts. So there's more overlap than that it may seem at first, and it's nice to discover that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we've got one of our participants was kind of tying into that, asking just in regards to, like, they've been working in theater as climate action for a couple years, but trying to build those relationships with environmental partners, they've found that often the environmental organizations are stretched so thin that they don't have the capacity for arts partnerships. So do you have any advice or tips on how to build those relationships when we all know working in the not-for-profit, people have such limited time and ability to assist?
Yeah, yeah, I think I completely understand that, and that it's very real. And the other thing I can offer is you have to make it as easy as possible for them, so they don't have to do too much. So they, to not stretch them thinner than they've already stretched. And I think if they see what's in it for them, then it's easier, because sometimes we may ask for partnership, but it serves one partner more than the other. If we can manage to make it clear what's in it for them, or if they see it clearly, then it's more likely that they will invest more in making it happen.
Absolutely, yeah. Could you, and maybe this is a hard question, but could you give some examples of like what is in it for them, right? So in approaching those partnerships that you've made so successfully, like what are some of the benefits that you've been able to offer for those partners?
Well, the example I would give is with Climate Change Theater Action, for example. We give people complete control over what they do. We just provide some of the material, we provide an incentive, we provide some of the material, we provide, some marketing, and then we say, whatever you do, it's good. Like, you don't have to, it can be, if you, like, there's an organization in Florida, it's an environmental organization. A few of the staff members got together and read the plays to each other. That's great. That's great. If that's all you can do, that's great. And that has its own impact. And so it's being flexible and then giving people agency, I think. Sometimes it goes both ways. Sometimes the sciences want the arts to illustrate what they do, which is purely in service of the science. And sometimes the arts want the science partners to just serve the art piece. But I think we need to give people agency, so they can decide how they can and want to get involved.
That's great, thank you. We've got another question from someone wondering why you have chosen theater rather than a documentary. Do you see a particular advantage to communicating this important message through theater?
So I studied film. I initially went to graduate school for film, and I ended up finishing both degrees, one in film and one in playwriting, but I was interested in documentaries, but I turned to theater. And so my theater is a lot of it is documentarian almost. It's fiction, but I call it fact-based fiction. I don't think that theater is better at telling those stories. I think it's one way to tell those stories, and it's the one way that comes to me the most naturally. Theater has things that other forms don't have. It's live. Usually we're several people in a room. We have a direct interaction. We can build community. It's much more difficult to do that with a film, let's say. But on the other hand, film reaches a lot of people. So every art form has its own plus and minuses, and does certain things very well and others not so much. But theater was my way in. So the answer is because it's my way in. That's why I'm doing it that way.
And kind of, I guess, connects to that, something I know we struggle with our mandate too, is how do we then get beyond preaching to the converted, right? So people who go to theater tend to be from a certain subset. And then also, if people hear that it's going to be climate change theater action, will that not just lead to people who are already invested in climate change being the ones who participate and view the work? Have you come up with any techniques as to how do we get this beyond the choir?
Yeah, so my answer is going to be yes and no. So with Climate Change Theater Action, we don't organize the event, right? So, and for good reason, because if I go in a community where there's not a lot of reception to climate change to start with, that's it. It's not going to work. But if somebody from that community has wants to gather people together and has already an in, they may be more successful. One example is there was an action that was done at a university in, I believe it was in South Carolina, and the professor said to us afterwards that she was working with students who had no support to talk about these things at home. They were not encouraged, they were not supported, and so doing it in the university settings was empowering for them. They felt supported and they were encouraged to ask questions and get interested. So that was one way. A different example is I've presented the play I said I presented at Kansas State University. One of the students who was in the cast, his parents were not, they didn't believe in climate change at all. And yet they came to the play twice, right? Because their son was in it. And so there was, and who knows if they changed their mind or not, but they were willing to come. This said, I don't do what I do to convert people, because why would you go to the theater to see a play about climate change if you're not interested and you don't care? But there is a study that exists in the US, which it's, if it hasn't done in other countries, that I'm sure it relates, but with slightly different numbers. In the US, it's called the 6 Americas, and it rates Americans, it puts Americans on a scale from alarmist to deniers. Alarmists are people who are full in, already very active. Deniers, obvious. And these two categories, there's 6 categories, and so there are 4 in between. The 2 at each end represent the smallest percentage of people. And so the ones in the middle are the people who are already concerned, already interested, but not necessarily active. They're not necessarily doing something about it. So these are the people we're talking to. They will come to the theater. They will be like, oh, maybe this might be interesting. And, maybe then they will talk about it with their family more. Maybe they will engage a little bit more. So those are the people I'm trying to reach.
I really appreciate how you said the young persons whose parents came to see the show, right? Because I think we are seeing that the youth engagement is really high right now in terms of when we look at it globally. And what gives you inspiration? What allows you, because I know you've also talked in the past about the negative stuff doesn't actually get people activated, because it just feels, as you said earlier, like it's just never going to change, or it's too much to manage. So what things are making you feel inspired to continue?
A lot of the time is the people around me, or I see people being so creative, so dedicated. I see the work that's being done, and I'm like, okay, I want to do my part. And if I don't do, then I would get depressed. So I need to, to put all of this internal turmoil into action.
That's good. That's great. And for you, it sounds like the smaller things are just as important as the bigger things, right? So being able to see the small steps.
Yeah, of course, because we're not going to see the goal, or at least I won't see the goal. I'm too old. I'll be gone before we reach any kind of, so being able to see the steps, to see each little battle, each little success is as important, even more important than just keeping our eye on the goal, because the goal is so far away, and it's hard to, it may be hard. Sometimes it's hard to see how we're going to get from here to there. So every little step has to be celebrated.
Absolutely. And we'll just kind of do a final call if there are more questions from anyone participating on YouTube or in our Zoom room right now as well. I think I'm interested in kind of hearing unfortunately, we've had to revamp everything. So maybe we can talk just a little bit about what that means as we see if there's any last questions that people might have. But yeah, you were supposed to be, premiering your play. And I know when we originally had you coming here to Winnipeg, which would have been your first trip to Winnipeg, that you would have been coming from the Arctic, and that, all of that was happening at once. So being in New York City right now, like, how does this all affect your artwork, and how does this affect, like, the fact that you're specifically looking at this this topic and what it means to us right now during a pandemic?
Well, my life has changed a lot because I was often on the road, which is, not great for carbon emissions. So in that regard, it's better. And plays are not being produced. So all of that has changed. I believe it's still possible to be creative. And I believe I will do whatever it takes. If, tomorrow somebody was to say there will never be another play in the theater, that's not going to happen. But then I would be like, okay, I'm still going to finish this series. It's just going to look different than what I expected. But beyond that also, there's been all the changes that have happened with the pandemic, but we've had the worst of everything in terms of the temperature, the Arctic, the Antarctic, just this past summer. So that's another reminder, the pandemic made everybody go like, oh, what do we do now? How do we do it? And I have certainly felt that, but I've also been reminded that we can't stop. We can't be distracted. The pandemic is something huge that we have to contend with, but we can't lose sight of the bigger picture, which is like all this other stuff related that's happening.
And we've got one of our participants in the Zoom room here, Martine, who has a question for you. Martine, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, hi. So I work at the Manitoba Arts Council, which is a public funding agency here in Manitoba. So two things. I want to tell you something, and I want to ask you something. So I guess I'll start with the ask. Well, first of all, your presentation was awesome. Really appreciated the sharing of the screen. All the images were fantastic. Thank you so much. That was really, really wonderful. Really enjoyed hearing about climate change theater action and your other organization. So from a funding perspective, something that's starting to happen, and I know it's happening here, not at the Manitoba Arts Council, but certainly in other funding agencies, and it's a conversation that we're having in the funding world, is asking organizations what they are doing to address climate change and making their funding partially contingent on their answer. And I mean, that's a long conversation, and I'm not trying to, I'm just wondering, theater companies are struggling to do so much, and there's so much going on. I just wonder what advice you might have for somebody who's running an organization, either very large or very small.
Yeah.
It's a big one, isn't it?
Yes. I'll start with the small, because we're small, so maybe that's easier to address. The thing about being small is you're more nimble usually. So it's easier to make changes, and change is incremental. It can start small and get bigger and bigger and bigger. With the bigger organization, so I don't have a direct experience with that, but I know, and you probably know too, Martine, Julie's Bicycle in the UK.
Yes. Yeah.
They have been hugely successful at getting large organizations to pivot towards sustainability. And that's been by working in concert with the British Arts Council. And I know the Canada Council is also getting on board with that. So, and what I understand from what Julie's Bicycle has done is, because I saw Alison, the founder, I know her and I've seen her talk several times, and she says, if you want people to succeed, you have to give them what they need to succeed. So it sounds like what they do is not just ask organization to pivot, but they're giving them all the tool and the support they need to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really great advice. So the thing I was going to tell you was, I don't know if you're familiar with, there's an artist residency that we used to have a partnership with in Iceland. And it's a really cool residency in a tiny community called, oh my God, it's called the Ness Artist Residency, NES. And it's in a small town. It's a coastal town, kind of northwestern part of Iceland. And they host artists from all over the world. So you're there with other artists and you can do whatever you want. It's an old fish processing plant that they've turned into residency units, and you live in about there's 4 houses that they own in the community. It's a tiny community. It's a very collaborative based community. Anyway, I'm just putting that, put that on your back burner. It's a really great organization, and we don't have a partnership with them anymore, but it's super cool.
Yeah, thank you for letting me know.
Check it out in terms of how to get to, I mean, there's many ways to get to Iceland, but that's an actual residency. And I think you're there for a month.
Okay.
The deal. And then you'd get to, they literally have artists from all around the world, and they don't have a lot of playwrights. So it'd be interesting for them to kind of, meet you, whatever. Anyway, just a little tip for you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Martine. And yeah, that's, I think, something that we've certainly been thinking about. And Chantal, you participated also with the National Arts Center, and they had speakers around a lot of this topic. And I tuned into some of that, and there were some great conversations as small theater companies, things of like not buying anything new, right? Like, how can you make sure that in your productions you are being as sustainable as possible? And yeah, I think that conversation is happening. Do you have any resources or tips or places that people can look to get more information around some of that?
Julie's Bicycle is really a great resource. They have a lot of different reports and studies that they've done. That's where I would go first for a theater organization. And then, there's some simple things that we can think about, like not bringing bottled water to rehearsal, plastic bags. These are the small things, but if we start there, then it provides a scaffolding to then make bigger changes.
Great, thank you. I don't think we have any other questions, so I was just gonna see if you had any kind of final thoughts or anything that you wanted to leave people with based on the conversation today. And I know we have you doing all kinds of stuff with us this week still, so I'm looking forward to that. But is there anything that you'd like to leave people with?
One of my friends does a lot of workshops with non-artists. He is part of Citizens Climate Lobby, which is an activist organization around the climate. And one of the things he does with people is he asks, what is the thing you care the most about, you feel most passionate about? And, people will say, it's my dog, it's the place I go on vacation every year, or, whatever it is. And then he asks, find out how climate change is going to affect that, and then do something about it. So, for people who might be wondering where to even start, I would say that's the place to start. Find out, identify what you're passionate about, find out how climate change is going to affect that, and then see how you can make a difference.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for all of this today, and really appreciate your time. I wish you could be with us here in Winnipeg, but
I know.
as I said, like hopefully in the future, we will be able to meet in person and have you meet more of our community as well. But yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of the festival, and at least to be talking to people virtually. That's better than nothing.
Absolutely. Well, and I know Chantal has also been working with our Launchpad contingent quite a lot over Zoom. And so that's been very beneficial to our artists and our emerging artists. And so we're very grateful for all of that. And yeah, we've got people on our chat here saying thank you as well for everything today. So we will hopefully see some of our audience and people watching at some of the other FemFest events coming up, and have a wonderful rest of your day. We're going to our bake-off at 6:30 tonight, our playwriting competition. So thank you, Chantal.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for attending, taking this time to spend with me.